Well, the penultimate episode of House of the Dragon Season 2 has just been released, and it's safe to say that not only was it the fieriest episode of the season, but it very much looks like the tides have now turned, and that was highlighted most by Aemond retreating after there being a glimpse of fear in his eye. With an episode that was very much focused on Rhaenyra strengthening her army, Alicent contemplating what her place was not only in the realm but also in the world, and Daemon having to go back on a deal that he promised in order to make some kind of progression. Let's delve into the episode and break down all that there was to take away from it. Here is House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 7 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Rhaenyra, Ulf, Hugh and her plan. During this episode, we saw it follow on immediately after Rhaenyra heard the news of Seasmoke being claimed by somebody. It was here where she saw that Adam of Hull had claimed him and that he had no ulterior motive other than to progress his position in life and serve his queen. This was something that came as a shock to Rhaenyra, because at every other point in her life, whenever somebody had acted so quickly, there had always been a sense of betrayal involved. But with Adam, we saw that she willingly accepted him, and it also spurred her on to realise that the theory of there being some kind of Targaryen lineage in the bloodline of a person could be enough to claim a dragon. Obviously, we know that Adam is Corlys' son, and both Targaryen and Velaryon blood makes it easier to claim a dragon, hence why it worked. This is what allowed us to see many of the small folk from King's Landing that could have had Targaryen blood be transported to Dragonstone with the possibility of claiming a dragon if they were worthy of being accepted by one. This showed the mindset that Rhaenyra still had, and the fact that she was still acting in desperation in order to gain any kind of strength over Aemond and Aegon. The very fact that the Dragon Guards disagreed with her approach and wanted nothing to do with it was very telling. It's because they almost knew that it would be a repeat of what happened to Ser Steffon Darklyn, and that was exactly the case. They didn't want innocent people to die for the sake of a chance pairing. Rhaenyra emphasised that by claiming the dragons it would allow the war to end without bloodshed and that it would save a countless number of lives and bring peace. However, as we saw, the small folk almost needed to be willing to sacrifice themselves in order for that to be possible. She walked amongst the commoners with no guard, going down to their level in order to show that she valued each and every one of them being there, giving them a glimmer of hope. We heard about how Vermithor was the second largest dragon behind Vhagar, and when it appeared on screen, honestly, it looked way more frightening than Vhagar. The spikes, the sharp teeth, it had a completely different build to Vhagar, and it was haunting. The two small folk that we were specifically following were Hugh, who we've seen being drip-fed to us throughout the entirety of the season, and Ulf. With Hugh losing his daughter, you could tell that he almost had nothing left to live for, and that by claiming a dragon it would change his and Kat's life forever. So this was his last chance saloon, and he was prepared to die for it. The fight that Hugh had and the unwillingness to back down, whilst also being prepared to sacrifice himself for the lady that he allowed to get away, I think that was the very thing which resonated with Vermithor. Vermithor was also known as the Bronze Fury, and Hugh has a lot of pent-up anger and hatred within him. So that's something that Vermithor also probably connected with and locked onto as well. With regards to Ulf, we saw that he fled the chaos, but ended up in a cave in which the second dragon that Rhaenyra spoke of, Silverwing, was waiting within. Once he heard her, she approached him, and he simply healed and was prepared to accept his fate and die. However, that didn't happen at all. She ended up claiming him, and they flew over King's Landing together, before ultimately returning to Dragonstone at the end, and providing one of the most badass shots that the show has ever given us, showing the sheer strength that Rhaenyra now has with her army of dragons. As Silverwing, Vermithor and Syrax were all mounted there whilst looking on at Aemond as he retreated. This is what Rhaenyra wanted. She's now ready to fight and show that she's the rightful heir to the throne. One thing that Ulf claiming a dragon also taught us was that he was in fact a Targaryen. He was what you'd probably describe as the local blagger in a pub, somebody who has stories and you never quite know whether to believe them or not, and he himself even had doubts over if he was from Targaryen lineage, but this showed him and us that he was in fact who he believed he was. Alicent. I'm really loving Alicent's story in this season of the show. I think it's one that's showing a real human side to her. She's no longer involved in the politics of war, and we're seeing her take a look within herself to truly understand what her purpose is moving forward. One of her first lines in this episode was, "All my life I've endeavoured to serve my house or the realm, but now none of it matters." And this is so true, and what I also said in the video last week. Her children no longer want or need her in the small council, despite the fact she ruled in Viserys' name when he was approaching death, and now she almost doesn't know what to do with herself. She can see the destructive path that Aegon and Aemond are going down and how it's also impacted Helaena, but there's simply nothing she can do about it. She's also witnessing the suffering that's occurring in King's Landing, with the small folk going without food and turning on the crown, and she's also seeing the castle in disarray, with it being a mess and with rats roaming around. I feel she's almost seeing what Viserys said to Daemon, about how wearing the crown destroys everything and crushes whoever wears it. She's seeing her family fall apart and be destroyed over it. During this episode, we witnessed Alicent leave King's Landing with just one guard as she wanted to escape the chaos that was around her. She had barely any dialogue in this episode, and all of her acting was done with her facial expressions and body language when she was in the woods. We saw a woman that didn't know what to do with herself and didn't know if she would even return to King's Landing again. However, once she closed her eyes in the water and was in a tranquil environment, it seemed like she got out of it a completely different person. A person that could be fueled with determination to stand up to her children. Aemond has viewed her as weak throughout this season, so I wonder if her new mindset will change that viewpoint that he has. As with more threats than he could have ever imagined, he may need more support. Daemon. This was Daemon's best episode in a long while. This is because it didn't just contain him being confused and having visions that were plaguing his mind. Yes, there was one, but it had King Viserys in it, so I'll allow it. In the previous episode, we heard about Grover Tully dying and Lord Oscar Tully stepping up, a person that Daemon previously disregarded. However, this scene went from Daemon having the upper hand to it transferring over to Oscar, and it's showing that in order for Daemon to get what he wanted, he needed to betray somebody that he pretty much promised the world to. The Riverlords were displeased with Daemon over the fact that he allowed Ser Blackwood to slaughter innocent people that weren't prepared to bend the knee to Queen Rhaenyra. Oscar knew this, and he used it to his advantage to get the Riverlords on his side and show that despite the fact that he was only a boy, he could be trusted to have their best interests at heart. He flipped things on its head and made Daemon execute Ser Blackwood for the atrocities that he gave him permission to carry out in the name of Queen Rhaenyra in order to get the Riverlords on his side. Daemon had to show that he was willing to condemn the actions that he previously permitted and show that he was regretful about them. The close-up shot of Daemon as he killed Ser Blackwood showed that he wasn't in control like he thought he was, and that he just got outsmarted by a mere boy. When he returned to his chamber, we saw that King Viserys was sitting on his bed, and he saw his brother in the state that he was in when he died, his physical form where he was missing an eye, something that Daemon had never seen before in such an exposed way. Viserys mentioned how he never wanted the crown and that it crushed whoever wore it. He also said, "You always wanted it, Daemon. Do you still want it?" This is showing us that Daemon knows the price that comes with ascending the Iron Throne. He constantly corrects those that call him prince instead of king, so he does so desperately want that power. However, he knows the consequences that come with it. He had to kill somebody that he trusted in this episode in order to make progress. Is he going to be prepared to kill Rhaenyra if that time comes? Aemond. We didn't actually see that much of Prince Regent Aemond in this episode, but he got a focus right at the end of it. The small folk of King's Landing were chanting that there was a dragon above the skies, something that Aemond wasn't aware of at all. Larys Strong, Master of Whisperers, failed to inform Aemond about sea smoke being claimed because he deemed it a whisper worthy of just staying in the wind. And with Aemond not hearing of that, it also meant that he didn't have any clue that there were more dragons that were being claimed over on Dragonstone, something which showed a weakness in his council. As Aemond does, he acted in the moment and with rage and went to Vhagar and was prepared to fly to Dragonstone to kill the dragon that he saw. However, when he got there, he was met with Rhaenyra standing on the edge with 3 dragons alongside her, the very thing which caused Aemond to flee out of fear because he knew that at that moment he was outnumbered. This is the first time that Rhaenyra had laid eyes on Aemond since he killed Viserys and also Rhaenys. You could see the burning rage that was fired up within Rhaenyra and the desire to hold back in going after him. Aemond now knows that they're at a disadvantage when it comes to the dragons. We heard that Daeron and his dragon would be joining the fight on Aemond's side, but that doesn't make a large difference to numbers, especially when the dragons on Dragonstone are looking far stronger than ever. My review of the episode. I thought this was such a good episode of the show. The final section where Vermithor took centre stage and we saw the sacrificing of the small folk was a moment that was visually stunning to look at, but also haunting to watch as well. Even Rhaenyra felt guilty about what she was doing, but she knew that it was for the greater good. I really enjoyed getting more time with Rhaenyra in this episode. The dynamic between herself and Jace is something that I'm enjoying watching develop. Jace is insecure about his claim to the throne following Rhaenyra due to the fact that Harwin Strong is his father, and he doesn't have the traditional silver hair that Targaryens have. And as well, the fact that in his eyes, the mongrels that she's summoning to be chosen by the gods is something that he believes makes him weaker. There hasn't been a single thing that they've both really agreed on in this season, and it does make me wonder where it's going to go. Commoners arrived at Dragonstone, and one walked away with the second most powerful dragon that there is, something which makes Jace instantly weaker. It was good seeing Paddy Considine back on our screens as Viserys this week. He's probably my favourite character from the entirety of Game of Thrones, so I'm always pleased to see him when he does appear. Daemon's section was a lot more interesting this time round too. And with an army now on his side, it really does show us that in terms of ground army, Rhaenyra has the strength. In terms of the air and dragon power, Rhaenyra has the strength there too. And in terms of the view and support of the small folk, Rhaenyra has the strength as well. So it's going to be interesting seeing how the Dance of the Dragons is going to play out. So, there you have it. House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 7, Ending Explained. What did you think of this episode? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.